A baby died 100,000 years ago. No hospital, no doctor, no explanation. Just a mother holding a body that was warm 5 minutes ago. And isn't anymore. And the answer is stranger than anything you've been told. This wasn't rare. This was normal. For most of human history, half of all children born never made it to age 5. Half every single community, every tribe, every family that ever existed before modern medicine buried children the way we file taxes, regularly, painfully, and with no way to stop it. To understand what they did with those children, you need to understand the scale. Today, in the developed world, infant mortality sits around 0.3%. 3 out of every 1,000 babies don't make it. That number is so low that when it happens, it shatters families. It makes the news. Now rewind 50,000 years. Paleodemographers estimate infant mortality among prehistoric humans ran between 40% and 60%. Some estimates push higher. In certain populations, more babies died than survived. Sit with that number for a moment. A woman in the Upper Paleolithic might give birth 8 or 9 times across her life. 4 or 5 of those children would never learn to walk. This wasn't a crisis. This was the baseline. Death wasn't something that visited childhood. Death lived there. So what do you do when death isn't an exception but a rhythm? When losing a child isn't the worst thing that can happen to you, but something that happens to everyone? Multiple times, the answer depends on when and where you look. And it gets stranger the deeper you dig. In 2017, researchers working in a cave called Panga Saidi on the Kenyan coast unearthed something extraordinary, a shallow pit, deliberately dug, roughly 78,000 years ago. Inside, curled into a fetal position, was the skeleton of a child no older than 3. They named the child Mtoto, Swahili for child. Mtoto had been placed carefully. The body wasn't thrown in. Someone had wrapped this child in something. The bone positions and soil compression suggest a shroud of animal skin or plant material. The head was resting on what appears to have been a pillow 7,000 years ago. No written language, no civilization, and someone held a dead child, dug a hole, wrapped the body, positioned it gently, and walked away. That's not instinct, that's grief. But Mtoto isn't alone, and not every ancient baby was treated this gently. Here's something archaeologists noticed decades ago and still can't fully explain. At most prehistoric burial sites, infant remains are massively underrepresented. Adults are there, adolescents are there, but babies, the ones who died in the greatest numbers, they're missing. At Neanderthal sites across Europe, spanning 200,000 years, researchers have found elaborate adult burials. But infant remains from those same populations are astonishingly rare. Not because babies didn't die, they died constantly. The bones simply aren't where you'd expect them. There are only a few possible explanations, and none of them are comfortable. Possibility 1. Infant bodies were disposed of differently. Not buried in the ground, but placed in trees, left on platforms, dropped into rivers, or exposed to the elements in ways that left no trace. Dozens of indigenous cultures practiced exactly this. The Yanomami of the Amazon cremated infant remains and consumed the ash mixed with banana paste. Aboriginal Australian groups placed infant bodies in hollow trees. The Sami buried infants in tree trunks. If prehistoric groups did anything similar, and the absence of remains strongly suggests they did, then for most of human history, dead babies didn't go into the earth. They went back into the world. Possibility 2, and this is the one that disturbs people most. Some researchers have proposed that in certain ancient populations, infants who died before a specific age may not have been considered fully human, not yet people, not yet eligible for the rights given to those who were. This sounds brutal by modern standards. But the ethnographic evidence is overwhelming. Among the Ayareo people of South America, documented by anthropologists in the 20th century, a newborn was not considered alive until it touched the ground and cried. If a baby was born and did not cry, or if the mother decided she could not raise it, the infant was buried immediately, before it was considered to have lived at all. Before you judge them, remember, half their children died. Every family, every generation. This isn't cruelty. This is a psychological survival mechanism hardened over millennia. When half your children die, you cannot grieve each one the way a modern parent grieves. Your mind would shatter. So cultures across the world, independently, develop the same solution: delay personhood. Don't attach until survival is more certain. Don't name what might not stay. At Çatalhöyük in modern Turkey, one of the earliest permanent human settlements, occupied from roughly 7500 to 5700 BCE, researchers found infant remains buried under the floors of houses, dozens of them, tucked beneath plaster floors that families walked over every day. Adults received elaborate burials with grave goods. Infants were placed beneath floors quickly, often without any objects. Some archaeologists argue this was closeness, not dismissal. Keeping your child beneath your feet, still part of the home. But the absence of grave goods tells a different story. You didn't mourn what hadn't yet arrived. But then there are the cases that shatter that pattern. Krems-Wachtberg, Austria, 27,000 years ago. Twin newborns, hours old at most, buried together. Their bodies were covered in red ochre, a pigment that doesn't occur naturally in that cave. Someone found it, carried it, ground it by hand for hours, mixed it with fat, painted it onto the bodies of 2 babies who never opened their eyes. Then placed a mammoth shoulder blade, nearly 4 feet across, 50 pounds of bone over them like a shield. Qafzeh Cave, Israel, 100,000 years ago. A child roughly 3 years old buried with the antlers of a large deer placed carefully across their body. Those antlers were brought from a distance. Someone carried them to the burial site specifically for this child. These aren't disposals. These are monuments. These are parents saying, "This one mattered. This one we refuse to let disappear." You might think the story ends here. Tender burials, harsh realities, cultural adaptation. But the bones have one more thing to say, and it's not tender. In 2010, a team analyzing infant remains from multiple Paleolithic sites across Europe found something no one expected. A significant number of infant skeletons showed cut marks, deliberate, systematic, made by stone tools, not random scratches. Tool marks consistent with defleshing, the removal of soft tissue from bone. Now, before your mind goes where you think it's going, defleshing isn't necessarily what it sounds like. In many documented cultures, removing flesh from bones was a mortuary practice. The Zoroastrians placed bodies on towers for vultures to strip. Tibetan Buddhists practiced sky burial, cutting the body apart and offering it to birds. Defleshing a dead infant may be evidence of care, a deliberate ritual we can no longer fully interpret because no one is left to explain it. But there are sites where the evidence is harder to explain away. At Krapina, Croatia, Neanderthal remains dating to roughly 130,000 years ago include bones from at least 2 children. Those bones show cut marks, fracturing patterns consistent with marrow extraction and burning. The same patterns found on animal bones at the same site that were clearly processed for food. At El Sidrón, Spain, Neanderthal remains from roughly 49,000 years ago include a juvenile. The bones show the same processing marks as the adult remains. Long bones cracked open, tongue bones cut. Were these cases of starvation cannibalism? Ritual consumption of the dead? Something else entirely. The honest answer is we don't know. We can read the marks on the bones. We cannot read the minds that made them. A cut mark tells you what happened to a body. It cannot tell you why. It cannot tell you if someone was weeping while they did it. And here's what makes this complicated in ways most people don't want to sit with. The line between ritual and consumption may not have existed for these people the way it exists for us. Remember the Yanomami who consumed infant ash mixed with banana paste. That wasn't nutrition. That was love. You consumed your dead so they would remain part of you, so their essence would pass into the living. So they wouldn't rot alone in the ground. Is it possible that some ancient humans consumed their dead infants not because they were hungry, but because they couldn't bear to let them go? We will never know for certain. But the possibility sits there in the archaeology like a stone no one wants to turn over. So which is it? Did ancient humans grieve their dead children or not? Did they bury them with tenderness or dispose of them without ceremony? Did they mourn or did they consume? The answer is all of it. And that contradiction is the most human thing about all of it. There was no single answer, no universal protocol for dead children. Some were buried with extraordinary tenderness, shrouded, painted, protected. Some were placed under floors and walked over without ceremony. Some were left in trees or rivers. Some were processed in ways we can only partially understand. And some, maybe most, left no trace at all. Their small bones dissolved into soil, crushed under time, erased completely. The vast majority of babies who died in prehistory are simply gone. No burial, no bones. No evidence they existed at all. And that absence might be the loudest thing in the entire archaeological record. The modern world treats infant death as a catastrophic aberration, something medicine should prevent. And that instinct is good. It drove us to build hospitals, develop vaccines, create neonatal care that saves millions of lives. But our ancestors lived in a different reality. A reality where death was not the opposite of life. It was part of it, woven into every season, every family. They didn't have the luxury of treating each loss as unprecedented, so they built systems, psychological, cultural, spiritual, to survive it. Were they colder than us? Less loving? Look at those twin newborns painted red and sheltered under bone. Look at the antlers placed on a 3-year-old in a cave in Israel 100,000 years ago. These people felt exactly what we feel. They just couldn't afford to show it every time. Every single one of those choices was made by someone who was holding a child they loved, and they did what they had to do. We don't get to judge them for it. We just get to live in the world they built for us, where half our children don't die, where we have the luxury of grief,